Hello everybody, welcome to Sonictalk episode 715, recorded today on Wednesday the 25th of May. We were back from Superbooth last week and we're going to NAMM next week. Well, I'm not going to NAMM, but the team are going to NAMM and there's going to be NAMM coming soon, so prepare for incoming. But we also have a great crew with us this week. But before we get there, I just want to remind you all of our Patreon and check out all the Superbooth stuff. Also, a bit of an apology because we've been so fixed on kind of getting these shows done. The Patreon has been a little bit light, so I do apologise for that. We will be bringing some more stuff into that. I'll be able to turn my focus back onto it and start taking care of all you folks. But thank you very much for all of you supporters who you know who you are. Also, I want to say thank you very much to Baby Audio and iZotope for supporting the show. There'll be messages from them a little bit later on, as ever. And all you folks over in the Discord, in the IRC, and all of those places, thank you very much. And also I want to say thanks to Dom and Wagyu for sorting out the cross-posting and all of that business. We're getting there, and I think we're working towards the master plan being complete at some point. Perhaps, I think this century will probably, we can safely say it will be this century, but I can't commit fully. I wouldn't sign it in writing. Anyway, welcome everybody. The start over there with that chuckle was from Mr. Dom Hawken, who we haven't seen since Superbooth, actually. Dom, Mr. Wiggly, a maker of plugins, also sleep apps, all kinds of stuff, coder extraordinaire. Yeah, Mr. Wiggly, how have you been?
I've been good. I've been to Warsaw and back in the meantime. More on that, I think, probably next week, which has been really good. Music related, which is good. But Superbooth, still hasn't left my system really. It's such a nice event. I'm not going to go to NAMM. I'm sure it's incredible, but I think that might be a little more stressful than the whole Superbooth kind of light, friendly experience. But I'm sure it's going to be amazing. That's a shame that they're so close together, because if you something, I guess, they could spread it a little bit. But no, I've been really good, actually. Been really good. Been messing around in the studio, making some music. I did a kitchen sample challenge, which has been quite fun, just recording banging stuff in the kitchen and making music out of it, and give yourself a couple of hour deadline for a competition that was on Facebook, so that was cool. All very good.
Sounds like a laugh. Sounds like a laugh. Thank you for joining us, of course. And we also have, a man who doesn't need any introduction, but I'll give him one anyway, Mr. Ty Unwin, who's there in his studio, media composer, where he slogs away without daylight. They have to bring his food and push it under the door. It's a little bit like being in prison, but he owns the prison. So it's kind of, how are you, Ty? I'm sure it's not like that. I just want to make it dramatic.
Thank you, Jake. No, honestly, it is like that at the moment. Although, it is like that. Although I finished, I got an episode finished of a thing that I'm doing. I got it finished last night, and I don't get the next film until Friday. So, I mean, this for me is just unknown. It's just, I've actually got 2 days of not killing myself at the moment. It's back to the bad old days at the moment. It's back to, exactly as you described it, essentially. So I've got a couple of days of not doing that, which is great.
Well, I hope the weather holds for you.
Oh, I'm not bothered about weather. I'm more bothered about, I went and set up my PS5. That's what I'm more bothered about. That's what I did this morning. So get my priorities right. So pay some bills.
Not enough screen time, eh?
PS5. Exactly. I need to get my tan up. Yeah. So all is well. All is good. Yeah. It's life is hunky dory. I can't really complain. So.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad to have you here. It's been such a long time, and you're always welcome.
It's been ages.
And of course, it has been a really long time, hasn't it? But I'm sure, you're here now. And we also got Mr. Gaz Williams, who's there in Bristol, also a veteran of Superbooth, a returnee. You were only there for a short period of time, Gaz, weren't you? Because you had to go off and do some gigs and tour and stuff. Gaz Williams, of course, YouTuber and music technologist, bass player, all those things. In fact, are you doing a show tonight?
I've been invited to a psychedelic Turkish band. I'm on the guest list, and it sounds so good, and it clashes with showtime. So I'm like torn at the moment because there's so much I do want to share on doing a show. So I'm unless I do a late night one. But yeah, Super Booth for my brief time that I was there was amazing. And I should mention that the Super Booth 2023 announcement was made yesterday, so it's happening at FEZ. So, but I mean, the thing is, people kept saying excuses why they weren't going, because doing this and this and this. Book it now, everyone. Put it in your diaries. Honestly, it's the best event in the world for music. If you're into music tech like we all are, it's the best event in the world. So get it in your diaries now, and then you haven't got any excuses. There. What do you reckon?
That's right. Yeah, I think that's a fairly good shout, and hopefully everybody will be. Actually, they had a really good turnout. They put the numbers, didn't they? There had something like 6,000 attendees, which isn't bad for an event like that, and I'm sure it'll increase next year. And I suppose the thing is, because it's so big now and spread out, it didn't feel like that busy. I mean, but it actually was, which is great. So yeah, really,
we were
really
blessed with pretty much good weather. There was a bit of rain at one point, but it was. But I came back with a couple of goodies. Look, I've got one of these.
Oh, you got the retro kits.
Yes, which
that's a prototype, surely.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I think it's more or less as will be. But just in case you're not aware of these things, it's like a little tape recorder. What is it? The Alesis
MMT8.
MMT8. That's its influence. But I mean, it's so small. You can just have it on the side of your keyboard, or anywhere you like, really, and treat it almost like a multi-track recorder. And when it records MIDI, what's quite interesting is the 8 tracks here. Each of the 8 tracks can contain a full 16 MIDI channels worth of info.
Yeah, so you can have an entire song
into each track. Yeah, so it will record, and then that'll sort of record MPE. I'm guessing, or certainly note per channel, but it records everything, all the CC values and whatnot. So, so really cool little thing. So I'm going to be
it looks
nice.
That.
Yeah, it's cool, and it's got a built-in metronome with a speaker as well, which I think is so cool.
Beep, 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 all of those things. I'm glad. That sounds great. You got swag. Oh, what's that?
That one as well. That's the quad drum from VPME, which I think they were announcing a new expander for that. But this thing is a beast. It's an absolute beast. Although I've just completed my live rig now with including a bunch of drum voices, and it's like this comes along and it's like, oh no, so I just
moves everything.
Yeah, it's like I think this is one of the problems with modular. It's just it is never ending. But
the thing is if you're if you're a completist with your case and you finally got it laid out and full, and then something else comes along that is a different HP to the thing you're replacing with, it messes everything, doesn't it? I mean, that's if you're that complete, it completely cocks it up.
Yes. So
and there is no such word as complete either. You cannot use the word complete. I've completed my
there is in my head. No, there is in my head.
Yeah, it doesn't exist in modular world. Definitely exists in entire world.
No, it is. My modular is complete. That's it.
Good.
Empty. Completely
well, you got
empty.
55, haven't you?
No, it's not. It's
just
not.
Next to...
It's not. Yeah. Sorry, my Eurorack is complete. It's full, and it's staying as it is forever. I will never ever have anything else added to it ever.
Yeah, right, okay, true. Fair enough. I'm wondering whether that's because you haven't got one at all.
I have. I've got 3 cases full of the thing. And a KB 37. No, I have. Yeah, but that's it. There's nothing being...
Okay.
No. I've done my
switched on.
When was the last switched on? Well, no, it will be switched on Friday, but until it hasn't been switched on for ages. Yeah. But no, I think there is on Friday. It will, because I think there's a job that I've got will be very much based around. Yeah. Well,
I can also recommend the Create Audio keyboard. I can't remember what it's called now. That's really good. The Nifty Keys. That's actually quite a good. If you need another keyboard, That's pretty cool. That anyway. I suppose we should probably get into some serious business. I mean, and we cannot really avoid the sad news of Vangelis' passing. I mean, it's like it's really all I can say is it's sad. But I wanted to play a bit of this because it's so emotive. I was playing it, and there's a chap on the comments. This is what's it called? It's called Memories of Green. And Luke Bingus on the comments of the YouTube said, I could honestly see myself making the conscious choice of having this, if I can, be the final thing I listen to before I die. I know it's a bit bleak, but I think, stay with me, the bleeping and industrial sounds really do elicit the image of my mind of a man on life support, reminiscing on the heartbreak, beauty and humanity of his life experience. And I honestly, when I was listening, I read that and I was listening to this and I just thought, oh my goodness, that is so apt. And, it is really sad that obviously passed away, but what a legacy. And for me, I think I wrote a rather bleak headline, which was just Vangelis is dead, which I didn't want to dress it up really because it feels like such a moment. With Blade Runner, this particular film, it seemed to be the perfect apex of emotive imagery and emotive music that I don't think particularly in the electronic field, we'd never really seen this before. This was the very first time that it had been this intense, certainly for me as a kid. And I remember the opening scene of Blade Runner with the soaring CS-80 and those shots of the Tyrell Corporation and sort of post-apocalyptic Los Angeles or wherever it was, and it just sort of blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. So, I'd rather this was more of a celebration of the chap than, obviously than misery at his passing. But what I didn't realise, I was listening to a big playlist on YouTube today, and there were loads of things that I'd never heard of. He started off doing quite a lot of sort of animal documentaries before he got into proper soundtrack work, and then did the Carl Sagan series and loads of other stuff. And there were just little motifs and themes in there. I thought, I know that, and I did not know it was him. I just completely did not. And I think a lot of it is quite wafty and perhaps non-melodic, but some of it, or also a great percentage of it, has got very, very strong melodic content, and that was obviously the genius that he had, and it was mostly improvised as far as I can tell. Now, Ty, I have a feeling, I come from memory, are you a Vangelis fan? I mean, the stuff that he does to picture, it's very kind of very specific.
I'm a Vangelis freak.
Okay.
I mean,
to the right
this
man.
For me is, this for me is literally, when everyone was losing their whatever when Bowie died, and the people that people really think the world of and think they're their hero. He was. I think I put a thing on Facebook. Basically, he was music for me in my teenage years. He was music, and
right.
So to say that I'm gutted is putting it mildly. I mean, we all know I've made it very quite vocal that his latter releases, especially the last 2 or 3 albums, have been not exactly his best output. But the reality is, you can't keep it up forever, as as the actress said to the So it's it's incredibly sad, unbelievably sad, and so I even his early works, because obviously, as you said, his early works weren't particularly electronic. They were kind of quite jazz infused, kind of psychedelic in the late 60s, early 70s, and then the whole electronic stuff with Albedo 0.39 and Heaven and Al and all those, and right through to all the soundtrack work. They all have a common trait, which is kind of one of simplicity, really. And as you said, melodically, harmonically, he could be incredibly simple, and then he'd completely counter that with some incredibly complex stuff, especially textural. And obviously the CS80, which he was literally the god of, and I think the problem is when you play a CS80, it's trying to not sound like Vangelis. The moment you play a CS80, you automatically slip into Vangelis mode. And so he was literally, it's very easy to say my hero, but he really was my hero. And I've said it before, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now the way I'm doing it if it wasn't for him. And I won't be doing what I'm going to be doing in the future if it wasn't for him. So he was a huge influence. And Very sad. But as you say, celebration-wise, there's so much amazing music out there. So much amazing music out there.
50 albums I was looking at on the Wikipedia
including
page. I mean,
soundtracks and things. Yeah.
Astonishing body of work. And not only that, it's just sort of working methods. I remember, I may have told this story before, but when I was working at a local nightclub and I was the house engineer, and they had a studio upstairs, and there was a female engineer called Raina Shine who came down to do some front of house stuff, and she was saying, she used to work at Nemo. She was like one of the assistants or his engineer at Nemo for a while. I guess that would have been late 80s, early 90s maybe, late 80s possibly. And she was just saying, that one of the stories was that he just had a load of Yamaha Rev 1s, which are these amazing sort of spaceship kind of, they were the sort of Yamaha equivalent of the 480L, huge rack unit with a big kind of remote control, much fancier remote control than the LRC, I have to say. But it was just, everything was set to 9 seconds, and that was kind of that's where it started. And I was listening back, and it's, I'm sure that's probably true, but it's more about the voicing than the actual. You don't really notice this huge amount of reverb in his stuff. It's more to do with the compositional stuff, isn't it? It's quite interesting.
The thing is, what you find is, it's because of the simplicity. That's as simple as that, really. And this is kind of where it went wrong in latter years, because he was still using the same kind of long reverb settings on some incredibly complex, kind of multi-layered stuff on his setup. And that's kind of where it went wrong, because that long reverb always worked so well because of the simplicity of what he was actually playing. And he never, I've always said this. Well, I would, if you can play one note, play one note. Don't play 276. I hate musical masturbation. If you can play, if one note does the job, play that note. And what's so great is he played what he had to play, and that's why the long reverbs really shone. And he didn't need anything, kind of harmonically fancy. He just kept it simple, and the reverb and the textures did the work. I think the interesting thing, the most interesting thing about him is that when it started to go wrong was in the early days, because as you say, the way he works is it's completely natural, and he would literally just look at the picture and play as much as he could in absolute real time with no editing. It was just live. Yeah. And so back in the day when he had, it's a CS80 and a VP330 and a Fender Rhodes and, maybe a 700S, and it was all as much as he could play with his hands, and he would do as much as he could live with a few overdubs, but generally speaking, most of it was a live take to picture. And that's how he worked. That's how he wanted to work. He hated the reason that albums like Direct work less well is the fact that he was suddenly into programming, and it wasn't as much real time. The problem began when he had his own system commissioned and built his own system, which was basically like a glorified organ. And as amazingly complex as that setup was, and we've all seen the videos online of that setup.
Very impressive.
And he had incredibly impressive, with dozens of foot pedals, controlling volumes, controlling filters, and the fact that it was, to all intents and purposes, it was an 88, I think it was a 61, and then a 30-something keyboard, and then one to the side, and it was a glorified organ, which meant that he was the chords were being shaped by what he could physically play at that one time. And as a piece of showmanship, it was incredible, because it was like him playing live the best organ ever. But the reality was that most of that was being midied off to quite basic samples, and there were lots of Roland modules in that setup. So technically, although it had moved forward sound-wise, it was just very staid and very 90s. And so the last couple of albums he's done basically sound like glorified organ music using modules from the 90s. And he had, ironically, a few months ago, he had updated his setup to include a lot more modern contemporary stuff, and more to the point,
we saw the picture, didn't we? Yeah, we saw the picture.
And he reinstalled the CS80 back into his setup, which was amazing. So everyone was looking forward to going back to the old days of a simpler setup, not this bloody organ crap, and to a simpler setup with him back to the CS80, back to a Fender Rhodes, back to more, since, and unfortunately that never happened because of the illness and COVID and everything. And it's such a shame, but that sitting down and just writing to picture is and not going into loads of programming. I actually said this to a friend the other day, is that you can always tell when I get to the end of a project, because the last few cues I write, because most of it is all lots of programming, very epic, very complex. And when I'm running out of time, you can always tell, because my cues become incredibly simple and incredibly open. And it's because I'm running out of time and I sit there going, Christ, I've got a 4-minute piece to write. I'm basically going to write that in 4 minutes in real time. So those are the cues that I do literally do a Vangelis. I do a Vangelis and sit there with a kind of piano and strings and synths, and I do it all kind of in real time. Spend half an hour then editing it. That track's done and out the window. What you don't see is the track I was writing for 4 days before that, which was a 30-second track that took 4 days because it was all programmed. And the reality is, and I'll be totally honest with you, the tracks that I do like that, where it's literally just sat down, very minimal, done to picture, every single time are the best tracks. So you think I'd learn, which is basically start with that and don't do any of the big epic shit, and the big epic stuff, and just do the minimal stuff. But I'll learn one day. But anyway.
Well, there's a lesson learned. Well, thanks, Ty. That's a great piece on Vangelis. Gaz, I mean, I know you know Aphrodite's Child, one of the considered also to be a contemporary kind of prog rock classic. I mean, and that's where his roots started.
Yeah, that's an outstanding album, the 666 one. You know, it's an amazing album, and I think, well, because of course that was with Demis Roussos as well on bass and lead vocals. Wow, what a band! But for me, I think the first time Vangelis really connected was with John and Vangelis. You ask me, where do I go? You know, that Somehow I Find My Way Home, that song, which I absolutely loved. And it felt so futuristic and bright and clear. It's, you know, it could be cheesy by some measure, but it's not, because of just the glorious beautifulness of it. I think that combination of Vangelis and John Anderson was just was magic. I watched an interview with John Anderson talking about Vangelis recently. I think it was recorded before he'd passed, but John was talking about when he went over to his place in Paris and he had this palatial suite, you know. And but the thing about Vangelis was he was apparently a really lovely person who was very warm, I'd have loved to have met him. Has anyone met him here?
No, didn't.
I wish.
I think he was quite private. I don't think you would have necessarily got to meet him that easily without working with him, I guess. You know, I would assume. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, no, nice one. Dom, I know you weren't necessarily au fait with a lot, but you must have, Blade Runner must have figured some point in your
I was speaking to you beforehand, and as I said, I don't have that much to say, but then you kindly sent through the playlist of stuff, and just like you, I was thinking, hang on a minute, I do know that. And the John and Vangelis track that Gaz has just mentioned definitely seeped into my subconscious and made me love synthesizers, you know. So I think I would very much have noticed if he wasn't around. It's just that I never actively, followed his work. I mean, what a brilliant thing to do, though, to play live alongside picture, to produce those kind of things. My immediate thought was when you go back to the silent movies and someone's playing piano alongside. But
that's how he saw it. That's exactly how he saw it. Yeah,
it's just amazing. And you're so right that you might get it completely wrong. You might, so you go ahead and you do another take, but run the picture, start playing, and keep it simple because you've got two hands. And when you nail it, which I would imagine with him is probably more times than we ever would, what a thing! What an absolutely brilliant thing! And to be honest, looking back at my own career, it's this quick, simple stuff that has been, I say, successful to me in terms of people liking it or whatever. It's. The best songs are the quick ones that pop into your head. The best keyboard parts are the obvious ones that come straight into your hands or your head when you play along to something for the first time. And the more you concentrate on something, the more, well, personally, I just add way too much. If something's wrong, I'll add stuff rather than remove it. So it's a really good lesson. The other thing, which is a slightly side point of view, it's certainly inspired me to live more healthily. I think I mentioned this to a couple of friends. It's like, as you're getting older, we're all getting older, and he clearly wasn't keeping his health to the best of his abilities, if you like, and I'd like to live quite a long time. So living more healthily is a good lesson to learn out of all this stuff. So
I think the other thing is that a lot of the reason why he did it that way, it was as much to do with the fact that, as I think we may talk about, he didn't really want to be doing this. This is the thing that people don't know about Vangelis, is the fact that he kind of wanted to be seen as more of a kind of a serious composer. So the side of Vangelis that we get is not what he was doing a lot of the time. This is the showbiz bit. And so the reason, if you went to him and said, I want a film score, I mean, first of all, he did very few and far between. He wasn't a jobbing, film composer. He would literally kind of do it, and he'd do it as quickly as he possibly could, just to kind of get it out the door, which earned the money, and so that he could go back to doing what he wanted to do. And I mean, it's kind of fairly well known that he is a bit like Prince, and that he has just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of his improvisations and his music that will probably either never see the light of day, or at some point someone will come and collate all this and, now that he's gone, maybe put out some kind of, released some of it. But the reality is he was essentially a serious composer at heart, and his frustration was having to be the performing monkey. He didn't want to be the performing monkey, and that literally was what earned the money to buy what he wanted and live the lifestyle that he wanted, and give him the time to do what he wanted to do, which was write serious music, which he did daily, that we will probably never get to hear.
Yeah.
And I mean, and when are we going to talk about that interview that he did about? I
think we might. Yeah, we might. We'll try. I think we're kind of we are extending, shall we say? And I'm conscious that I've got to. I feel a bit crass bringing in a commercial at this point, but I suppose it has to be done. We wouldn't be here if we wouldn't be if we particularly of the subject that we've just been talking on. But we're not performing monkeys. We're just doing what we do. But yes,
I am.
Hopefully we will get the opportunity. Let's just have a quick word from our friends over at Baby Audio, who have got a special. Let me just bring this up. Here we go. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Yes. So Baby Audio, save 15%. Baby Audio makes creative effect plugins designed to add colour and depth to your mixes. They won Plugin of the Year 2021 in Future Music and Computer Music magazine, and nominated in SOS Awards 2 years in a row. You might want to try out that I Heart New York, which is Baby Audio's first plugin, which is kind of packs the New York parallel compression trick into a simple plugin experience. It was also named one of Sound and Sounds magazine Plugins of the Year 2020. Get 15% off anything on Baby Audio when you check out with the code ST15. Thanks very much for their support, and we hope you do check out their stuff. Right. Yes, the other piece that we had was, and I wasn't sure whether we'd get to it just purely because of the amount of time we spent previously. Maybe if we go somewhere else and then come back, that might make more sense, just purely because we can kind of have a bit of light and shade. So one thing that I was really interested in, let me just come to, let's see. Well, I suppose they're all kind of fairly deep subjects, really. Let's go to the Arturia V collection, because it's also got the CS80, which has been totally rebuilt, and I just thought it was kind of worth mentioning. So part of the reason this came up is we actually filmed a great piece on the V collection, which has got a new MS-20 emulation plus completely reworked CS80, Prophet V and VS engines. And the audio was balked, and I couldn't use it because it was distorted, and that would have not presented it in a good light. So I just wanted to bring that up because I'm going to hopefully get some more now. But it sounded really quite impressive, I think, because I know particularly first when the CS80 and the Prophet V and the Prophet VS came out. I mean, these are probably 10 years old, so the code base for these things was a little bit more cookie cutter. And now they've really kind of come on leaps and bounds. And certainly what I heard of the MS-20, which was really impressive. And so yeah, they have released that now. And I just thought I'd throw it. I don't know, Ty, whether you use any of the Arturia stuff in your work.
Yeah. All of them every day. Yeah,
all of them every day.
Well, no, all of them. But I use something probably from that collection every day. No, I don't use them all every day. Yeah, and they get better every single time. The only slight objection I ever have with this is the fact that is that they do the same old thing every time, which is always 199 to update from the previous collection, and they always stick in. It's normally 2 or 3 new models, and it's always 199 every single time. And then you can get the whole thing for not that much more money to buy it from scratch. And I always
$499 from $599 at the moment.
Yeah, you see, now my problem is if you're paying $199 compared to $499, and like lots of us, we're on 9 now. I've been there from 1. So if you work out how much money I've spent giving them every single time I give them their 200, every single update, and then you can come along and get the whole thing from scratch for $499. I always just turn around and go, it's not fair. If you're a long time user that's invested a lot of money into this each time, you should get it at a rate which is less. You're updating it, but at the end of the day, you're updating it for just literally a couple of cents. And whether you want them or not, you kind of just want the latter version, the better versions of what you've been using and bought into 8 times before, which is what's happened. I've bought every single collection and I've paid $199 every time. It's not fair. That's all. That's all I'd say.
I think that's a fair point.
Forgetting that, they are brilliant. They're getting, and also that every time they do get better. The CS80 now, the version 4 is a lot better. And it's and you say you're right. The 20 does basically sound like a 20, but it's
really good, and poly as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. And they all have that. I mean, people turn around and just slag them off. Say again, we're going to go into the same old argument of it doesn't sound like my Jupiter 8, or it doesn't sound like me. No, but the Jupiter 8 next door doesn't sound like your Jupiter 8. They all sound different. I'm going to safely say whatever they modelled it on, it gets close enough to have a flavour and a hint, and and at the end of the day, if you're really that anal that you're going to sit there and start comparing it with the real hardware thing, you're missing the point, which is you're meant to be writing bloody music. So it's not going to make any difference whether you use your real Jupiter 8 or this Jupiter 8 plugin. They're both going to sound great.
Apart from the fact your real Jupiter 8 might still be being serviced when you really want to use it. That's the.
I think the reality is your real Jupiter 8 is going to be being serviced. It's not even might be, will be. Yeah.
Somebody's got to keep Kent Strong in business.
The reason I did bring this up was because I had this great video ready to go and I couldn't use it because of the audio. But honestly, the MS-20 and the CS80, they were just like, okay, that sounds really good, because they totally recoded them, and so started from scratch. So you are getting quite a lot of newness, and they do
totally. Yeah, I heard them over there. Bizarrely, I only bought them from the last. The number 8 series. It was an ecosystem that I'd kind of managed to avoid because I had so many other synth plugins, and I'd never ever jumped in. And it was just another of those, oh gosh, yeah, they look amazing, but hang on a minute, how many of these emulations do I need? Blah blah blah. And then I think it was something crazy like the vocoder that tipped me over the edge. I needed a really nice vocoder, and I have vocoders, and nothing really sounded like what I was hearing in my head that I thought the vocoder should sound like. And I thought, okay, now there was an offer on, probably because this new one was on its way soon, and I bought into the whole thing. And boy, I wish I'd bought in earlier. It really is good. The vocoder that I was after was absolutely perfect. I didn't have to do any tweaking. I turned it on, I spoke into it, and it sounded exactly as I had in my head, which was like, gosh, this is insane. And everything else is really well modeled, and it definitely adds, I mean, the excuse of, well, I've already got a lot of other plugins, it brings a whole new dimension there. So I haven't gone through the first 8 and spent, £1,600 over the years or whatever to keep up with them, but I also completely understand, it's very annoying not to have the latest version of everything, even if it doesn't do that much else. It's just like the OCD of plugin collection. You've got to have it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I can only wave a big flag and say I'm really late to the party, but absolutely not disappointed in the slightest. So it was very good value, actually. If you can buy it when there's a deal going on, and get into the ecosystem when you can, I was very, very pleasantly impressed and surprised, actually.
It's interesting, Gaz, isn't it? There's all of these kind of big collections. They become kind of more valuable as they become more bigger. It's like, we're seeing some of these subscriptions that are starting with, not all that much. And then you go to someone like Slate, who've got tons. And then you've got the V collection, which has got a whole bunch of things. And they're getting better. The value is increasing, even though, if you were to join now, Ty's point aside.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it is an incredible thing that they are doing, though, aren't they? I mean, it's quite interesting to wonder where are they going to go next. Such is the comprehensive nature of this collection. I mean, it's got
subscriptions. Dare I say it? I hate to.
Oh no! I mean, in terms of. Oh
yeah. What?
Other synth, because like the SQ80 is a kind of niche synth. It's not particularly fondly remembered, is it? Not in the same way as some of the other classics that it's I mean, it does have its fans for sure. So it's just kind of curious now. now they've covered virtually all of the classics that you would have seen on.
Well, they've made their own. I mean, there's Pigments, which is actually a really good standalone thing as well. So I suppose maybe that's what they'll do. They'll just go in that direction.
But I was also just wondering what other nuggets they're going to sort of find, though, from the past. And I think that's just really nice. I mean, it's an incredible thing, isn't it? Just from an educational point of view, to be able to have access to all, to have very good and beautifully, the latest scalable graphics and stuff. They look really good on nice big screens. So these are, really educational. And I've always really liked that way that you've got the graphics kind of hide some of the controls, and you can kind of. It animates it, doesn't it? It reveals
CS80 style. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think stuff like that's really nice, though, because it does mean that you can have a virtual version of these synths and restrict your kind of access to them to what you would have had in the day. That being said, I just don't care about software instruments anymore. I get it's fun. I totally get. I tell you what, I was watching the other day. I was watching the Zills Lab Poly KB review I did, and it was like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and that for me was the moment where I went, oh. They actually sound. This sounds really good, and I remember that. And I was listening back and go, "God, it still sounds really good." But it was a turning point because we've talked about it before, where you get, particularly when it's depending on the sort of emulation you use, whether it's kind of circuit behaviour or circuit modelling or whatever. And that was a turning point in terms of what you could do in software in terms of realism and sounds of organics. And I think Arturia were. Like I say, right at the beginning, it was almost like underneath it felt like it might have been the same engine with a different GUI on it. Whereas now everything is really, is much more detailed. Yeah.
That's basically what you've described is basically, so back in the day, and you see, I get that with Cherry Audio. So Cherry Audio, for me, are where Arturia were on basically kind of collection number 2, collection number 3, something like that. So exactly as you say, a lot of the, from again, it's a personal thing, but Arturia in the early versions, they didn't sound that much like the what they're meant to be sounding like, and there was a generic kind of sound that, even though there were totally different synths, there was a kind of homogenous kind of something going on under the hood that was very similar. And for me, that's where Cherry Audio are. That Cherry Audio, they can roll out all this stuff because a lot underneath the hood, there's a lot of similarities between them. And I think what's good is that Arturia have. As each version comes out, they've moved. They have actually become more, I don't want to say accurate, but they become more
detailed,
more detailed, more different, more individual. So basically, you can actually hear the differences now. Whereas in some of the early versions, it wasn't.
I'm sure Arturia and all of the big, and also they make hardware, which I think obviously makes sense. I'm sure Arturia, like all of the big software, there must be an underlying kind of set of libraries that they begin with. I mean, I can't imagine they reinvent the wheel every time they do it. I mean, the UI and the structure internally is going to be different. There must be sort of things that we go, well, here's our basic oscillator, but we can use the characteristics from an oscillator from this synth in that oscillator. They've probably figured out just how to do that more efficiently. I'm guessing. I mean, I don't know this.
You'd think so, I guess. But in the way that some of these things obviously work, quite often the code base can can splurge outwards. There's always a project
Yes.
to bring it all back together again, but it never seems to work for most of the corporations I've worked with. There's always a project to sort it out, and that's a good thing when it comes to music. Actually, I think because you do want it sounding different. What I would say is, in terms of what they should be doing, is I love the fact that they all sound like the originals and all the rest of it. I want to be able to do almost Diva-esque style. I want to be able to take my PPG Wave and chuck it through my Prophet 5 filters and add the oscillators from a Moog and that kind of thing, and build the monster synth in a nice way. Ty's about to tell me I can already.
Well, no, but that's what they did with the Origin, with the hardware synth. So I've got an Origin. And that's what they, of course, but back then you literally had a Mini Moog, you had a CS80, you had a Jupiter 8, well, you had something else. But you could literally do exactly like that. You had a visual, you could take the oscillator from one into the filter of another, into the envelope, and that was the Origin. But again, that was just kind of ahead of its time, and before processing power was
totally totally
cheap enough to make it. So, but yeah. And that's a great thing. I mean, I've always said the Origin is a great thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, that takes their engines and brings them back in. I always get the feeling, perhaps with Arturia and Novation to a degree, that there's too many products out there for it to be manageable for them. Imagine being a product manager in either of those two companies. Fantastic companies, and they're doing it. But to connect the dots between all the software and the hardware, and to come up with a hardware version of it, is probably quite a challenge. And to conglomerate all the code base in the way that you described is probably quite a challenge. But I would like to see. It's such an obvious thing now to take modules of what they've now created so fantastically, and I'm not suggesting maybe a sort of blobs that I can wire together with stuff, but it could be a software version, but I can literally start taking the best bits of other things and really sort of merge them together, and that would be a really nice touch to reuse the systems that they've already coded. And it's kind of like what Diva did, hopefully they're working on something like that anyway.
Maybe that's what's going to happen. Anyway, I should probably just break here for another message from our friends over at iZotope, and here they come.
iZotope Producers Club is a one-of-a-kind membership for producers ready to take their tracks to the next level. Once you join, you'll gain access to powerhouse iZotope plugins and a curated selection of tools from our partners, such as Melodyne from Celemony. Plus, as long as you're a member, you'll get every future update to the iZotope plugins in your membership for no extra cost. We'll also regularly serve you new curated content like exclusive inspiration-sparking sample packs and preset packs, and industry-leading training ranging from our own tutorials to vocal production lessons from the world-renowned Berklee Online, taught by Grammy-winning producer and engineer Prince Charles Alexander. With new content being added every month full of valuable production techniques, tips and tricks, and solutions to common production problems, becoming a member is an investment in your career that grows as you and your career do. For more information on iZotope Producers Club, head to iZotope.com.
Once again, we thank them for their support. And if you're interested in maybe saving some cash, you can save 10% if you go to, I think, is it that button will work? No, it doesn't seem to work. Never mind. If you go to iZotope.com/Sonictalk, there's a special landing page here. And if you use the code SONIC10, which is all outlined here on that page, you can save an additional 10% on any of your iZotope plugins. And that very often applies to the bundles and savings already. So you can really whittle down those prices. Okay. I'm just trying to think where we should go. Gaz, have you got a favourite topic we could come to? I know I'm conscious that you've perhaps been slightly excluded from the last one, not being a software fan. Is there anything that you would like to go for?
Oh, out of the topic list?
Yeah, you choose.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a look. I'm just trying to find. As I find the topic list. Come on, update. Sorry.
Well, we've got the Vangelis on Success. We've got the Secrets of Swing. We have the Mod Devices.
Secrets of Swing.
And the Rode Procaster. Maybe we could do that, Tyler, because I know, Ty, you probably would love to talk more about the Vangelis and his weird relationship or unpleasant. Well, I suppose it's all of us, this relationship with the front-facing and the sort of back-room version of ourselves where we have to be in public and also just getting on with the job. But we'll start with, where was it? The Secrets of Swing. Yeah, this is an interesting one. This is vid 3. This is from...
Hi everyone, this is
F9
James
Audio's
from Freemasons
Wilshire.
and F9 Audio, and
Sounds like a
welcome to
Radio
the
1
first
DJ.
of the F9 tutorials. Today we're going to be covering one of the most important aspects of rhythm programming, swing. What is it? Where did it come from? And how can we master it and use it in our productions? This topic turned out to be so big we decided...
Right, I won't play the whole thing. And it sounds really simplistic. We take swing for granted. And one of the things I just didn't realise, I mean, I must have known, but seeing in this documentary, it kind of talks about how swing affects. But where it came at first, arrived as sort of hot jazz, swing jazz in the 20s. Before that, it just wasn't a thing. And then it kind of like, or at least not a popular thing. And it became this kind of incredible movement. And everybody freaked out because they'd never heard this before. And I just hadn't really kind of comprehended how big a deal that must have been. I mean, that must have been like sort of punk and rock and roll wrapped into the one thing, because that was such a shift change. So outside of that, just the nature of swing itself was bonkers. Must have been amazing. Everybody started dancing.
It's a bit of a simplistic history, to be fair. And I mean, but I thought it was a little bit. The video once you get into the longer episodes is full of useful information. But I mean, the whole kind of origins of swing, those obviously, as most things originate from Africa, but when you take a kind of clave rhythm and then the music that moves across it has to swing. I mean, it doesn't work unless it's swinging. So the origins of swing, had been heard by millions of people before the 1920s, millions of people. So I think just in terms of the recorded medium that was emerging at the time, then, but I think, in terms of it moving people for millions of years, I think as well, but, through that more, certainly the African kind of music from which informed blues, etc., and on it goes. But the old adage of "it don't mean a thing if it ain't got the swing" is so kind of true. Until you kind of get into the electropop days. But the swing feel, though, is something, as a player, I do tend to play with quite a bit of a swing in my playing. So if I'm playing against something that's quite straight, I'm swinging the notes against the more rigid background. And when you play with different musicians, I think it's sort of, the musicians often talk about the pocket, playing in the pocket, and that in a way is how someone is perceiving the swing. You might be playing pretty straight, like if you're sort of like doing, like in the bass, like there's a thing called a pump when you're going dum 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 dum, playing eighth notes, and you can be straight on it, or just ever so slightly, but when you're playing with a musician, you just kind of, if you've got that right thing that works together and you just feel that swing together, it's that movement. It's the sex bit of music, really, isn't it? It's that.
I think that's a fair point. I think it must be very. I mean, when you play with other people, it feels so good to get a groove going. It must be very difficult not to swing everything, even though sometimes that's not the case. I know, Ty. I mean, in terms of composition, I mean, playing swing is a lot different to programming swing, and we're talking. I mean, this video kind of goes into the sense of those kind of movements and the MPC swing and the legendary kind of vibes that certain quantized algorithms have. It's sort of quite nerdy in a way.
It is, but I don't think. I mean, first of all, let's just go back to the history bit. I mean, literally, I rolled my eyes when it was all about. I mean, it's almost like you've never heard of 6/8, you've never heard of 9/8, you've never heard of any music that was written in triplets, because all that is basically kind of an extended kind of swing feel. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to go into that. What I would say is exactly the same as Gaz, really, in terms of, I think even if you ask a musician to play, forget programming, if you ask a musician to play straight, the reality is if you stuck that on a timeline and analysed, musicians just don't play straight, ever. even when you ask them to play straight, if you sat down and analyze the transients, they always will. There's a certain level of swing, and to the extent that, so when I've got my quantize set up, so when I quantize things, it's always about 53%. Everything. I never quantize to 50%. Everything is set up to quantize to about 53, 54, depending on. And again, talking about the MPC. So when I was an MPC, kind of MPC was legendary. The swing on that was there was just something, and I think there still is. And even though they've supposedly copied it on so many things like kind of Machine and on the MPCX and whatever, they don't swing like the original MPC 60. And that isn't me sitting here and going, oh, and the world was a better place in 1987. It's not like that at all. It's still. There was something very special. MPC 60 and ASQ 10 swung in a very. It was almost like there was something quite wrong with it in a kind of quite human way, which made it just gorgeous. But again,
because it probably flipped either side of what because it only had
absolutely.
And it was just the error. It was the errors that made it swing like that.
Absolutely, that's probably exactly what it was. But there was something very human about it, and I think no matter how much they try to analyze that, when they then put it into kind of gear now that can do that, you don't get that level of error. And but yeah, so for me, swing is really important, but I generally don't think any real musician playing will ever play without a certain natural element of swing, no matter how subtle it is. I don't think anyone plays like a robot. Obviously, you can program it that way if you want. But
can I just jump in there though? It says there is this thing, isn't there? So when if you're walking down the street, your arms, you're not walking. You don't walk down the street. When you walk down the street, you swing. Everyone swings.
Is that how you walk down the street, Gaz? Is that how you walk down the street?
Stranger danger, stranger danger.
It's the fabulous Furry Freak Brothers walk, isn't it? That's the Gilbert Shelton style.
Yeah, I mean, actually,
I know what you're saying.
I actually do walk like that, but. No, but it's just that why I wanted to interject there though is just because that way we feel swing when we go about our daily lives. So I think when it's in the music, it makes it easier to move with because we naturally move with swing.
I think one of the things to just bearing in mind is that the one band that everyone reckons is kind of they've spent their entire career being called robotic, and if you look at all of the early Kraftwerk stuff. The drums on that they weren't programmed. They were played live, and if you listen to some of this supposedly robotic stuff from the 70s, if you listen to the drums on that, they swung all over the place, and yet everyone was saying, "Oh, it sounds like robot music," all through the Man Machine.
Well, that's the image. Well, I mean, do you say they swung or they were just out of time? I suppose is the.
Do you know what? I'd love to turn around and no, they weren't out of time. They were out of time in the case. But by its very nature, that's what it is. Swinging is playing out of time. So
what? Well, I was always told it was it's like the egg rolling down the hill. So you get this kind of cadence. It's like the is it exponential or what's the logarithmic? The one that
pendulum
the curve is like. Not that's linear, but the one that's sort of exponential is the essence of swing. I suppose. It's the same. It's the same for control law, isn't it? In terms of synth knobs,
I mean, I love that stuff, and I also love analysing it. I've been lucky enough to play with great rhythm sections who are way better than me at keyboards, and Gaz is right. And I'm also a massive lover of MPC60s, and I'm also really geeky where it comes to analysing that stuff. So I've got my MPC60 and I've analysed what it does, and I've locked it and I've also taken records and looked at where the beats lie and tried to computerize this stuff, and clearly it doesn't work because the whole point about this, the reason the MPC 60 is it's constantly moving. You could take a bar of MPC 60, and in fact James Wiltshire has produced grooves of all those boxes, the MPC 60, all that stuff, and when you look at and all they are notes on a grid, moved fractionally, recorded and taken from those things, and you can see that they move around. But what they are then is just bar repeats of the whole thing. I have to big up James Wiltshire though. Actually, even if he doesn't know his triplet history or whatever, he has made some really great videos. He's made a really good series on techno for beginners, where he got right up my street. He got a boombox and stuck it in a subway out in Brighton and recorded the resonances and stuff, and he's broken down some really good tracks. Also, I know it's a cliche, but their 909 library is
their libraries
it's my secret weapon, to be honest, so I really don't want to big it up that much, but yeah, the attention to detail on some of those stuff, I've got so many. But that aside, if I'm quantizing, I'm the same. It will always be swung, and I will normally play with a swing naturally, and then I will push the quantize back towards the swing beat. So I'll never go now do a 16A or whatever the equivalent is. I can take I will move it 50% back towards the beat if it sounds wrong. And the more I play, the more I actually don't bother quantizing stuff if it sounds remotely right. So I'll never go right now quantize that to 54% all the way through unless it has that kind of machine-like feel. I'll play it in, and then I'll just move it 50% towards the 54% swing, if you see what I mean. So you're not you're just moving the quantize towards the beat until it feels a little bit more groovy, because my groove probably lacks a little bit of I've got a theory. So, okay, imagine this, right? So, swing was introduced to the masses, shall we say, through recorded medium, right? A 78 RPM record would be spinning quite fast, and if you imagine that the hole was not quite in the middle, then the swing would have been accentuated, because it would have been an elliptical kind of journey, and the speed would have been wonky all the way around, consistently wonky. I wonder if there's a fact. I wonder if that plays a factor. I just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. I don't know. Early hip hop.
Ty's looking. No, Ty's got a stony face to that. You idiot! He's thinking in his internal monologue.
I'm actually thinking it through. Thinking that makes perfect sense, actually. Yeah, it's the same. Maybe it's the same reason that I once had a record by Our Daughter's Wedding. Do you remember Our Daughter's Wedding? The lawn chairs are everywhere. They're everywhere. Anyway, early 80s electro-pop American, but one of the only few bands that were actually half decent that came out of America, in my opinion. Anyway, so Our Daughter's Wedding, and I had their single, and the B-side was, I love this B-side, but it was off center when it was printed, and there was lots of wobble in there. And then when I loved this track though because of this and the way it felt and everything. And then when it got put onto CD many years later, I listened to it on CD. I was thinking, this doesn't sound half as good. And when I went to play the record again, it was the fact that it was a bit warped and it was a bit moving, and so everything you're saying could have a certain element of truth.
I wonder what the tolerances are in terms of the centre. In the same way, how tolerant the centre hole is. Whether it's what kind of movement from the absolute centre of the groove would change the groove in effect. Okay. Yeah. Well, somebody might want to do a study on that. It's not going to be me though. I don't know. I haven't got a working record player anymore.
Maybe someone won't. But
maybe somebody has already. Anyway, yeah. But I just thought it was a fun piece. Anyway, but let's see. There was because I think we did have another topic to do with Vangelis, and it seems sort of fitting that we should maybe close with that a little bit if everybody's got time. Because one of the things that also came up, this was on Synthtopia actually. It was an interesting insight into the way fame was just an enabler for him. So let's just play that, and then we can maybe discuss that a little. I know it's a fairly massive topic.
The way that I grow up, and the way that as I said before, I understood the world, and my first encounter with music, the first memories with music. Always they've been different. Imagine that I never grew up with the idea to become famous or to become a professional musician or to become a composer. I mean, all those things they didn't have.
it's a 20-minute video. I'll sort of prefix. I mean, essentially what he's saying is that, and this is a thing that runs through. I know Sir Ken Lewis sort of builds on this. Is the idea as a child you're sort of unfettered and you're not encumbered by any expectation. You're just learning for the joy of learning. You're exploring things, and I think that's what he's probably searching for. And the fact that he became professional and had to make money from it, and the record company said, "Okay, yeah, you need to do this, you need to do that," and he realised to make his living, to enable him to do his work. And I think this is something that we all struggle with. I mean, he just sort of voices it, and it's sort of appetite for the moment because he's just passed away, and it's actually a big topic. And it comes back down to these things where, you know, we've all talked about the fact also sometimes when we make music, sometimes we're doing it under pressures of time. I know, Ty, you do immensely, and the joy of just playing it for the sake of playing it rather than to complete the work to get paid or whatever it may be. All of those things become entangled, and it can make it quite difficult for us. Gaz, I'll come to you first because I know you seem like the sort of person who very much you enjoy being in the moment, the joy of it. When you have to do that gig, I remember when you did that gig in Paris when you were really under it and you had to learn this ridiculously complicated classical music, almost no room for sort of improvisation and moment. Was that an enjoyable thing, or did you just think, you know, so in relation to this overall topic, I suppose, is what I'm kind of thinking, exploring.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Maybe a bit too big for the last topic, but
you know, there's the happy place, isn't there, where we all want to be, I think, really. And if we can make that, you know, a career as well, then that's amazing. So I've been fortunate enough to have managed to have fused that into quite a lot of the things that I've done, and my kind of happy place is playing songs with us arrangement, but being able to go slightly off piste, come back in, and sort of still keep it, you know, keep the form
on track.
Yeah, and then playing with you know, if there's loads of people there all really enjoying it, and it's all just, then that's amazing, you know. Then it's like, that's the point of it. Everything else is a sort of bonus, or just, but you know, if you can get that happening for you. I should mention that I always try to squeeze fuzz wah bass into everything I do. And I managed on the Martin Carr tour that I've just completed, actually. He needed to switch over guitars. I managed to get a fuzz wah bass solo in. I got a big cheer for it as well. So talk about happy place. You know, that's me. So on the big stages, you know, and that's loud as well. Kind of playing fuzz wah, which I did actually some fuzz wah and super booth as well. I mean, it's something. It's my. In fact, when I landed a job with Cirque du Soleil. I passed an audition for Cirque du Soleil for a big show, but it was at the same time the Charlotte Church band was picking up, and I had to make a decision which way to go, and it was really difficult because the Cirque du Soleil one was a major job. But I decided to stay with Charlotte, and that was, we were on the bus coming back from Edinburgh, and we played in the Natural History Museum there, and midway through Charlotte needed to get a drink or something. I did an impromptu fuzz wah bass solo, and I realized
not now, Gaz, not now.
No, I didn't get told off for doing a fuzz wah bass solo, and that's what made me make my mind up about staying with Charlotte.
That would have been. I mean, if you'd done it with Cirque du Soleil, you might have done it, and then they've gone, "Oh, that's great. You have to do it every night the same." You know, they're very rigid, aren't they? With their
But I mean, that was just when you're in your absolute happy place, and it happens to be, you know, coinciding with your professional thing, then that's amazing. That's
excellent. So I think that's a really lovely kind of thing to aim for. Difficult. I mean, I know you've spoken before, Ty, about how often, you know, when you're working in the mode that you're in at the moment, at least it's a slog and it's just full on. But that's your skill and your ability, and that's what they're paying for. But it doesn't necessarily give you the endorphins you require for the happy place. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I think no, you're not. I mean, it's I think he was less talk. I mean, Vangelis, when he had that interview, he was less talking about happy place. He was more talking with the fact that he very much perceived it, as I said before, in that he did what he had to do to earn the money, because he needed the money to kind of get the gear for the studio.
That's 80 service.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. But to pay, and he basically very much saw it as he was, he'd go out and do the soundtracks or do the stuff, so that it enabled him to do what, he earned him the money, so he could then the rest of the time spend writing what he wanted to write. And I think that's the balance, that's the difficulty, because the problem I've kind of got is the fact that I'm kind of very much in work, man. Don't get me wrong, I've always said I love what I do. I'm the luckiest guy on earth, but so I love what I do. But the reality is, as we found when we did the Sonicstate track, that was the first track I'd written for myself since 1997. And so, kind of, I'd love to sit here and go, well, I do all this so that I can earn the money and get all the gear so I can go and do my own stuff. And then you kind of go, well, that's fine in theory. So when did you last do your own stuff? At which point I go, oh, look, squirrel. Oh, look, giraffe, just to try and distract the situation from the fact that the reality is I rarely get chance to actually write anything for myself. One track in 24 years.
I'm so glad that we enabled that. I feel somehow done the right thing,
But that's the reality of the situation. That is the reality of the situation, that he's getting that balance. And that what he was saying was, I do this just so that I can then write what I want. And that will happen. From my point of view, that will happen, because I already, as you know, that I'm writing a lot less than I was a few years ago. I just go through periods where it's hectic and whatever. But the reality will be that, I will be getting that balance better and writing more my own stuff. But it is a business. At the end of the day, the business pays for all the gear and pays for me to live the life that I want to live. So there's an interesting dilemma, isn't there? The artist dilemma, because as soon as people dig what you do, it becomes product, whereas before you might have just been following your nose, and therefore it's a very different thing. And then when it becomes product, and it's like, well, I want what you did like that again, please. I mean, I found that when we did remixing, everything was different until everybody wanted it the same, effectively. So you end up that's been my life for the last 20 odd years. That everyone wants, especially there's a few teams that I work with, and almost all the teams, because I've worked with them before, they all want what I did, the project before, or the project, I still get now, there's one, I'm not going to say who she is, but there's a producer and director I get who still keeps citing stuff that I did in 2002, going, can we have that score again? And they're going, okay, this is like the 11th time I've written that bloody score for you. Do I have to do it again? And inevitably I'll go, well, how about we try this? And I go off on this mad tangent. She'll go, yeah, that's really good, but can we have it still sounding like the score for, and you then have to make the decision of, do you have that fight again, or do you give her what she wants again? And and that's it. You kind of get to say sometimes where you go, do you know what? If that's what she wants, I will give her that, and then you just kind of go through the motions with it. But everyone's happy, then she loves it, and it's all good. But there is, I've always said this, I do have those two heads. I have autopilot head, where I can do what I do, without thinking, and then I have creative head, where I just go down this rabbit hole of being incredibly creative and different, and trying new stuff out, and it's getting that balance. Again, it's like getting the happy place. It's getting the balance between, kind of between everything, and that's the difficulty. And I suppose Gaz is right. That is my happy place. I suppose it's just getting into that happy place sometimes. It's
interesting, isn't it? Because we all get into creativity for lots of different reasons. Obviously, for Vangelis, according to it was just so that he could do what he wanted. But for some, it's about ego. Small e. It's like you get the kind of like the acceptance, and people go, your stuff's great, and it makes you feel good. And for some, it's just personal fulfillment, which is like, I love doing this, and I want to do it more. I don't care what anybody else thinks. And you get those weird situations where you have artists whose crass commercial work is massively successful, everybody loves it, and when they do the stuff they want, everybody hates it and nobody wants to listen to it. So it's kind of a weird, it's such a weird thing to deal with.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things really. From my perspective, if you're being creative, unless I enjoy it, it's awful. So, and I think that applies, crass commercial stuff, generally when it's successful, the people doing it tend to be really into it, actually. So if you cite someone like Stock Aitken and Waterman, who hit a kind of creative machine, if you like, at one point way back in the 80s, and were derided by the real musicians, they were really into what they were doing. They really loved the stuff they were putting together. It was a very, very creative environment, and they were proud of what they were putting together. People may not liked it, people may have loved it, and people may not think it's a creative form of music perhaps at the time, but they were really into it. And it's very, very hard. If someone at the time said to me, as a session player or as a writer, right, okay, now this is a really successful track, we like the style, now you need to do this, right, and make this was, I would make a very, by virtue of the fact that it was a copy, it might sound pretty close, it might have the right vibe to it, but it wouldn't be as successful because my heart wouldn't be in it, and it's almost like not worth starting. I could see if you're working creatively on something you don't like for example, if the song's done, but you have to spend 3 days comping breaths and vocals and doing work which is a little more quantifiable, perhaps less creative, then yeah, that might be quite boring. But you have to be into what you're doing, from my point of view, in order to make it sound good. It goes back to what we were saying, where the best tunes and the best songs are the ones that just come into your head when you're in that happy place anyway, and it just happens. Whereas if you have to pay the rent and you're worried that if you don't get this track away with this artist, you won't get paid for the session and blah, blah, blah. So you're really on the loser to start with.
And I think you make some points. I mean, I've always said, it's a different vibe, but it wasn't that different to the music machine that was Motown or the Philly sound.
Motown, yeah, exactly.
Rooms of people sat there churning out tracks where some producer, big shot, would go, "That's crap, make it more like this." And some of those people probably hated what they were doing, but they still wrote some. Carole King used to do it. There were loads of people whose job was to write songs as part of a machinery, and I think maybe people have different memories associated with it. Stock Aitken and Waterman, for a whole generation of people, is like the pop music of their youth, and it's full of joy and full of those things, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just seen as less value somehow, but it was a very similar process. I don't think there's that much difference.
I quite agree. And yet, so the other side of it is I'm quite a positive kind of person, so I try and put myself in that place whatever I'm doing. So if you're working with an artist and it's clearly not going right, maybe you haven't hit it off right, or maybe you're just, when you really should just get up and go, okay, let's come back tomorrow, let's go out and have a beer or something, you never stop learning, and the positivity about doing something when anyone else is involved, or when you're there, you never know what's going to happen. If you stop at that moment, that sliding door moment may never happen. And there's plenty of times when I've been in a situation thinking, my goodness,
you go
me,
too far, but you stretch out for a lot too long because you think you might miss something, when in fact if you just went
exactly. So I mean, there's always stuff to learn. There's always positivity to be drawn from even the most negative things. And I mean, this might be quite a luxurious sitting in my nice house, I've had success, it's a way of looking back, but the success that I've had has always been when I've been in the happy place, when I've been creating, and I think that's quite important. So if you're not in it, just feeling a little bit more positive about it, or picking up on the positive of the situation, puts you in a far better state of being creative and having something positive come out. Or then just get up and walk away, and come back at it later. But I know it's not the same for everyone. I know when I'm in the position where I might create something really good, and I know when I'm in the position where I probably won't and I should stop. It's just listening to those feelings and deciding when.
But sometimes you can't.
I so wish I had that luxury.
Really?
See, honestly, joking aside, that's what I dream. That's what I dream of. The reality is, no matter whether I'm feeling crap or in a good place, in a bad place, I've had an argument, I've got a headache, I feel rubbish, I feel whatever time of day it is. There's doing what I do. You literally do have to just be able to turn it on. When you're, and I'm not having. I've always said this so many times before. When you haven't slept for however long, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and you've got a deadline at 9, and you've got 5 hours left, and you've got 6 pieces of music left to write before you. That is not conducive for you going, hey, do you know what? I'm in a good place. All you do is you literally just have to be able to turn on or dig into this reservoir
turn on
of something.
Enough. Yes.
To get through, just to kind of get through. As I always say, the ironic thing about it is the reality is a lot of the time the best tracks come from those moments
because you're instinctive. But
it's just pure adrenaline.
The irony, that's the irony.
And the track that you opened the project with 6 months ago, that you spent 4 days doing, you then listen to the last track that you did compared to the first track that you did, thinking, well, actually, I prefer the last track, and yet the other one took 4 days to do. 6. So,
but I think you're not as inside it either. If you do it in the moment, then it's not. You haven't inhabited every single triplet, breath, quantize, tick.
Can I tell you this, because this is absolutely true? The last track that I finished on this episode that I did, the last track that I finished, I'd been in the studio for days and days and days and hadn't more or less left, and I just thought, do you know what, this last track I can just do this. So I went back and I lay on my sofa with a laptop, took out the studio, I'm just laying on the sofa with the laptop, and I couldn't be bothered to set up a keyboard stand, so I literally just put a little Native 25 keyboard down at the bottom on the side of the sofa. And I'm lying back on the sofa, a pair of headphones on, laptop leaning against my knees. I'm not even looking what I'm playing. I'm just reaching down to the floor as I'm leaning back on the sofa, playing the notes with my, kind of right hand. Then just did a next track, when I was lying back, looking at the screen, just play I didn't even look at the keyboard once, and I did the entire track with my arm resting over the side of the sofa to get it done, because I was that shattered. But can I also point out, though, I haven't listened back to it yet, and I don't think I will be, because at the time I thought it was great, and I don't really want to listen to it now, having sent it off and find out it wasn't so great.
Wow. Oh, well, thank you very much, everybody, for your honesty. I know it's sometimes these things, it's and it does sound a bit like, it's not, oh, poor me. These are the kind of, if you're working creatively for money, this is the sort of stuff that kind of happens from time to time. It's just the.
I think that there's an honesty, because lots of people would love to be, I've always said I'm very fortunate. I love what I do, but I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky. But please, I always say, don't ever think that it's just all a bed of roses. There's a lot, there's a lot of crap that goes with it. And one of the big ones is having to turn on this tap, whether you're in the mood or in the good place or a bad place, is really difficult. And there's lots of people I know who are fantastic musicians and fantastic composers, but can't do it this way. They have to be in the zone. They have to be in the right place. And you can't do what I do unless you can just turn it on. So, I'm not complaining. It is not poor me at all. I'm incredibly lucky. But, just being honest.
Well,
can I just come in with a very quick little anecdote, just because when I was doing that, because it's funny, you'll appreciate this. I was doing the fuzz bar solo in Super Booth, and then I get Andy Mack phoning me, and he knows that I'm gigging, he knows that I'm playing, and I've got it on my watch, it's ringing on my watch. I'm like, oh, what is it? So I just take a tiny moment, and from the watch, Andy's going, world exclusive OP1, can you make it here now? So that's put the bass down, and then just legged it full speed right down, and then it was right through, like seeing everybody. Oh, sorry, you are gonna legged it down, and then so literally that OP1 feature, I was like
interrupted your happy place. I'm so sorry.
Interrupted my happy place, which was okay with that OP1 interview until they set the price, and then that put me in a very.
Oh no! Come on, it's still. I've got to. It's still amazing.
I'm trying to figure out what the title should be, really, because you've got both of them at the moment, Gaz. I'm trying to figure out how to make "But I'm Doing a Fuzz Bass Solo" into a sort of shorter, snappier title, but the other one is "No, This Is How I Walk," which I thought was quite a good. Let's go with that. No, this is all right. Well, I'll go with "No, This Is How I Walk." Yeah, chaps, it's been a pleasure. It's been lovely to have you all here, even though the three of us have are follically challenged. Thank you very much for joining us, Gaz. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your anecdotes and everything. You're not doing a show tonight. I think you should go to the gig. To be honest, I think you should absolutely go to the gig. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't get the opportunity all that often.
I'm going to go to the gig.
That's all right. Yeah. Go and do your fuzz bass solo. What the hell, you know? See if you can jump on. Just take a fuzz pedal with you, and you might just be able to hook it up impromptu-wise. They might say, "There's no support band." You go, "That's okay. I brought my fuzz bass bar."
You're inspiring me now.
Yeah, go on, do it. You could always do a fuzz.
place.
You could do a fuzz bass stream show tomorrow instead, couldn't you? You know.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ty, thank you again. I do hope. Well, you've got a couple of days off, so do enjoy yourself, and I hope your deadlines don't get the better of you too much, and you can
do my
chill.
best. I'll see you the end of September after this.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, Ty, thank you so much. And Don, also nice to have you back.
Thank you.
It looks like all the chat was working. We'll have a chat about that at another point. But thank you very much, Don. Don't forget, next week, NAMM starts probably Thursday evening, Friday. Not quite sure it's going to work because I'm going to be doing some editing back from the UK. The folks are going to be there. But do stay tuned for more. There will be a show next week because I am not flying. So that means I can do the show and it'll be fine. See you all next time. That was Sonic Talk, episode 715. Thanks very much. See you later. Bye-bye.